Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Forever Motorsports on Forever Sports. I'm joined by Reese, and this is, of course, our weekly F1 podcast, proudly brought to you by Bitdefender as well. And big news, of course, this weekend. Ricciardo, first Grand Prix back in Formula One for AlphaTauri after replacing Nick de Vries. We did a video on that last week, and he will be coming in this weekend in Hungary for all of us, and we are so excited, aren't we, Reese?
Yes, it's looking like it's going to be quite an exciting race weekend. I mean, though, even off the bat, we're just going to be upfront about it. Red Bull have major upgrades being planned for this race weekend, which could give them another couple tenths, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite scary, you know, the strongest team in the whole field basically saying, oh, by the way, we've made our car better. And quite significantly better as well. So it's going to scare, I think, a lot of people into it. So, I mean, I don't know if the other upgrades and other teams might be able to compete with that. I think, actually, to be fair, it's probably about time Red Bull needed to get that time going, because teams were starting to get a little bit closer to their times. I mean, the likes of, even surprisingly, obviously, not last weekend, but the weekend before that, McLaren getting very close with their times and qualifying and actually sticking with Red Bull relatively well throughout the race. Obviously, Red Bull's still stronger, but it wasn't as clear-cut, and now Red Bull basically saying, all right, well, in that case, we were going to go ahead and just really rapidly go to the top.
I think the circuit may play into McLaren's hands yet again, because, I mean, we saw how they were quite competitive in Silverstone. Of course, that's a mixture of high speed and low speed corners, but Hungary is quite a high downforce circuit, which played into their hands certainly in Austria, which is also a high downforce circuit. So we could see them being once again quite competitive here this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a little article here saying Max Verstappen's warning to the F1 grid as he confirms Red Bull's Hungary car upgrades. And he holds a comfortable 99-point lead currently in the title race. I mean, that's just in itself just ridiculous. And Verstappen was just speaking to the media and saying that, of course, Red Bull has announced the upgrade package being brought to this weekend. He says, Hungary presents a completely different track. We will implement some upgrades on the car there, and hopefully they'll perform well. And regarding the focus of the upgrades, Verstappen ominously remarked, drag, low speed, medium speed, high speed, DRS effect, tyre wear, all of these areas. That's what we're working on. I'm not joking. So it's basically the whole shebang. So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows the fact that Max Verstappen and Red Bull are still perfectionists. I mean, they've got Adrian Newey, one of the most talented car designers out there. I mean, he is certainly chasing perfection with his car, and we can see it out on track how it certainly is perfection on wheels. It's completely dominating the rest of the grid, and quite easily, if I might add.
Yeah, so I mean, it's upsetting for some F1 fans. Of course, we've got Red Bull coming up with these extra upgrades for the weekend, which is certainly going to scare the rest of the pack, certainly the likes of McLaren, Mercedes. I would say Aston Martin and Ferrari, but they've dropped off. So we'll see what happens with them.
We'll see them possibly coming back in the next few races. I certainly hope that they get to grips with their new upgrades. I think Ferrari bought new upgrades to Austria, was it not?
I think so, yeah.
Well. Yeah, and I mean, we haven't seen them necessarily showing that hand just yet, possibly just taking a little bit longer to get to grips with those upgrades. Hopefully, we should see them finding some pace soon.
Yeah, so of course, the bigger news and the title of the show, of course, that of Daniel Ricciardo coming in this week for his first Grand Prix for the season, replacing Nick de Vries. So I've got an article here from the F1 site, and it says, Daniel Ricciardo says he is raring to go and is ready to have fun after securing a stunning F1 comeback with AlphaTauri as part of the upcoming Hungarian Grand Prix, a move that will break his half-year absence from the sport. And he said this, it's good, it's really good, Ricciardo beamed as the conversation kicked off. I enjoyed this, call it 6 months off. I think it was really good for me, but the more races I started to attend, the more sim I started to do, I was certainly getting the bug back, so to speak. Then jumping into the car a few days ago, I was like, oh yeah, it all felt very normal. It was one of those ones, the very first lap, oh, this is fast. Then within a few, it's, okay, I want this to go faster now, so it was really good. Ricciardo also added that he stayed ready at all times to ensure that he could fully embrace any opportunity to return to the grid, which he admitted was in the back of my mind given the unpredictable future of F1. And indeed, we are in silly season, and how silly it was indeed that AlphaTauri decided to stick with Nick de Vries for so long, I suppose, but now replacing him with Daniel Ricciardo. So how's he going to fare this weekend, Reese?
I mean, I think Daniel Ricciardo, of course, still has that passion and that fire burning deep within, that he is still a very competitive racing driver, one of the last of the late breakers. So hopefully we'll get him doing quite well this race weekend. I mean, certainly it's going to be interesting for the Red Bull management to see how he fares against Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki not necessarily having many teammates to set a necessary benchmark for him. So I think the Red Bull management will certainly be looking to see if he is actually competitive against Daniel Ricciardo, or if he has just been taking place and space in that team, and whether he should also possibly be axed, really, because I mean, the sister team is supposed to be bringing drivers up from the junior formulas to get them ready for the main team in Formula One. So yeah, there's a lot of people riding on the shoulders of Danny Rick. I mean, there's also a lot of rumors, of course, about him possibly going to be replacing Sergio Perez if he is able to outperform him at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was just reading here as well. It says Ricciardo also knows that should he deliver with AlphaTauri, or at least perform relatively well with the sister team, as you say, there might be a route back to Red Bull in the future, though he is currently focused on the AlphaTauri job, of course. And he says that's why it feels a bit like back when I was working my way up through it in the Red Bull family, he added. That was it. If you get results, we'll keep pushing you. We'll keep pushing you. That's really the mindset. I know the team. It's been tough to get points finish, to get a points finish this year, a top 10. This is AlphaTauri, of course. So to push this car and to try and get it inside the top 10, I think that would get everyone pretty fulfilled and excited. So, I mean, if Daniel Ricciardo manages in this first Grand Prix to come back and finish in the top 10, would you say immediately that that's an outstanding performance?
Well, I mean, if he's able to get into the top 10, certainly that would be an outstanding performance for that AlphaTauri, which has been far off the pace this season. I mean, it's certainly not a copy and paste of the Red Bull car. It's completely different, I think, way underdeveloped as well, for that matter. And we've seen how Yuki Tsunoda and Nick de Vries have been struggling. So I think it may take a few races for Daniel Rick to have an effect on that team and hopefully steer them into the correct direction in terms of development of that car as well.
Yeah, so if AlphaTauri can do something with Daniel Ricciardo, Sergio Perez is certainly going to come under pressure with regards to the media, the fans, and everybody else is going to go and say, well, if Danny Rick is performing for them, he's right there. You know, Sergio Perez is not performing for Red Bull. So how crucial is it that Sergio Perez finally does decently in qualifying this weekend and then also finishes the race well?
I think it's a bit of a chess move from the Red Bull management there to kind of go to Sergio. Well, look, we've put Daniel Rick into the AlphaTauri. If you're not able to outperform him at least, then you're in big trouble here. I mean, we don't necessarily know what Daniel Rick's going to be able to do. We'll see what happens here in Hungary, of course. But it's been, as we said earlier, 6 months of him out of an actual race car. He's, of course, done that Pirelli test now this last week, but still, we don't know what he's going to be able to do in that car. We've seen how Nick de Vries really struggled there, and he's a race winner in Formula E and Formula 2. But we'll just really have to wait and see what happens with Danny this race weekend.
Yeah, and Martin Brundle is actually surprised that Daniel was going to be back, because, I mean, he literally said, I mean, he's really pleased to see him back, but his honest reaction was just, wow, Daniel's going to go and do that, is he? So some people are surprised at his return. A lot of people not really surprised. I think we're of those two that aren't too surprised with his return.
I was slightly surprised because he said he didn't want to come back onto the grid in an uncompetitive car. But I think being out of the car for 6 months, being on the grid for a lot of the races, you really do miss that feeling of being in a car, as well as I think he does sense the opportunity that he could get a drive in the main team if he is able to outperform Sergio.
Yeah, and of course that's all in the Hungarian Grand Prix, which we will of course be streaming here on Forever Motorsports. And speaking of the Hungarian Grand Prix, we've got a little bit of a weather forecast, and again, it's weather right at the beginning of the week. The weather will change most likely, but right now The weather could be quite interesting for Hungary. So Friday, it's predicted to be the worst day of the weekend, at least if you love the sun. Temperatures are going to be clipping 30 degrees Celsius and will feature throughout the week. And practice one will drops at 1:30 p.m. local time, so it'll start at lunchtime. So it'll be right in the hottest part of the day. And apparently, it is going to be a scorcher. Saturday is going to say that we're going to have a bit of a green track because they actually reckon there'll be rain in the evening. So thundery showers could be predicted on Friday evening. That's what it's saying. The second practice session could see some showers and rain. And so they're likely to have a green track for Saturday's qualifying, or at least practice 3. So lots of hot weather mixed with rain is pretty much what's predicted for the weekend. So, I mean, that could definitely throw a bit of a spanner in the works. It also, if it rains each night, which is what it's predicted to do, that's going to make sure the track is green every single time they get into a session on each day. So the race would be green. The qualifying would only have practice 3, getting it a bit rubbered up. So,
I mean, it could make the race quite interesting because I think then degradation is going to be huge around here. Because, I mean, when your track is a little bit rubbered up, you pick up a bit of rubber each lap. So you're not necessarily destroying those tires too quickly. But I think with a completely green track, you do just degrade your tires a lot faster. I mean, with the being as well a high downforce track, you are going to eat away at those tires a little bit quicker than a normal higher speed track. But I mean, it's going to hopefully make it quite interesting for us. Speaking of though, interesting for this race weekend, Mark, we have a new qualifying format that is going to be taking place at this Hungarian Grand Prix.
and I was going to go to that next, of course, but it is a very interesting thing. And for those who don't know, they're going to be doing a different set of tires each session. So we're going to start the first qualifying session on hard tires. You can only use the hard compound. Then in the second session, only the medium, and the third session, only the soft tire. Now, the interesting thing here is because it's going to be very, very hot weather, they reckon, and then as well, like slight rain and otherwise influencing this. I mean, it's some teams are going to really benefit from this, some teams not, because certain tires don't work for all of the cars. I mean, we know Red Bull are going to be chuffed as anything because they are by far and away much faster on the hard tire than the rest of the grid are on their hard tires, whereas only on the soft tire do other teams start to compete a little bit more with those times. So, I mean, surely that benefits Red Bull massively in qualifying 1 and even 2.
Well, yes, I mean, it does look like it's going to be a big advantage for Red Bull in qualifying 1 and 2, as they are, as you said, very strong in the hards as well as strong in the mediums. We don't know, though. It could benefit some other teams further down the grid. We haven't necessarily seen that true pace from them on a set of hards. I mean, I don't think we've seen any qualifying laps put on a set of tires other than a set of softs this season. I mean, this qualifying format was set to take place in Imola earlier on this year. We, of course, saw what happened to Imola, some better than others. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I understand why they have brought this format into play here. It's because, I mean, they bring so many sets of tires to a race weekend, and then half of them don't end up being used, which is why they have brought in this rule now that you have to use a set of hards during Q1, mediums in Q2, and then in Q3 are you allowed a set of softs. Yeah.
So no, and I was just going to go and say, because you're going and saying earlier, they've got to use these tires and things like that, and they've never really done, as you said, and I was going to jump in, they've never really done qualifying attempts on a hard tire. So now that in itself, is that going to just like really cause drivers to be a little bit of concern, of course, because the soft tire's got the most grip, medium tire a little bit less, and the hard tire less than that. But of course, the hard tire's made to last a lot longer. Medium tire's said to be, of course, in between the two of them. The soft tire has the most grip around the track usually. So with the hard tire now, I mean, do you think drivers could actually end up like spinning and otherwise coming off the track a little bit, pushing those tires a little bit too much for what they're made for, or do you think that it's actually just going to be just slow laps?
I mean, I think it's going to be a bit slow. These drivers, of course, run so close to the limit every day, and they're able to keep the cars on track. At least the majority of them are. But I don't think it's necessarily going to affect them in terms of that. But of course, the lap times will be a lot slower than your sets of mediums and your softs. Yeah, it's not really going to affect it all that much. Your top teams are still going to be just as fast on the set of hards. It could just create a little bit of a mix up down the midfield, as you could get teams that are a bit stronger on the hards than were expected. But I do think that if your team is fundamentally fast, they're going to be fast on any tire out there.
But the interesting thing now, of course, comes to players' park firming, because now these hard tires are going to be used, these medium tires are going to be used, and these soft tires are all going to be used in the qualifying session. So you're going to use at minimum 3 sets of tires, and more likely 6 sets, because in each qualifying session you're going to go out in hards, and you might well go out in a new set of hards again towards the end of it,
yeah,
to try and get a little bit quicker at the end once it's rubbered up a bit more, and then similarly in Q2 and similarly in Q3. So now you're going to go into the actual Grand Prix with almost all of your tires for the allocation of the weekend being used. So no real new tires to speak of coming onto into the race weekend and even in qualifying. So that's going to also affect strategies, surely.
I mean, I think we'll get people saving up tires throughout the weekend. They won't go on as many runs as they necessarily need to throughout practice 1, 2, and 3. I think we could get people maybe running on a set of tires for the majority of the session instead of going on multiple new sets in order to save tires. Of course, they do have less tire sets than in the past in order to save on those costs of transporting them all around the world, of course. But I mean, I think it's a good move for Formula One. It pushes them in a certain direction as to use all of those tires. And as you said, it could make it quite interesting in terms of strategy on the Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, if the tires have been used and you're going on to used hard tires, they're not going to last as long. You maybe those pit stop strategies for a 1 stop be changed to a 2 stop. Those 2 stops change to 3 stops and things like that, because the tires don't last as long, and that could really, really affect the race. And I'm all for changes that could potentially make the racing more interesting, and that causes a bit more thinking in all of the teams, and strategies to change, and different variables. The more variables, the better for me, because of course then you've got more likelihood of things changing. So yeah, that's certainly going to suit some teams more than others. We know Red Bull probably smiling with new upgrades, and they know they're much better on hard tires and medium tires than the rest of the good. Not to say that they're not better than the rest of the good on soft tires as well, but they're at least a little bit closer most of the grid, though Red Bull and those hards especially, I think, are going to be very beneficial in a Q1. Now, a team that could be very much a disappointment yet again, and that is Ferrari. We always talk about Ferrari in terms of being the big disappointment, but Charles Leclerc has come out honestly and has said that he trusts the Ferrari team, and that yes, they do disagree sometimes, but he still trusts the team. And he says, I say to the team what I think, and the team say what they think. This is the way to move forward. I don't think the trust has ever been an issue. We have a very different vision inside the car than what the team has in the pit wall, so these things can happen. So I mean, yes, I understand that the pit wall has a different idea as to what's happening in the car, but we don't really see such a massive difference in most of the team setups, do we? Red Bull seem to be very much all together with what's happening out on track. Even McLaren seem to be quite happy with what's happening. Aston Martin as well. All of them very happy with the decisions on the wall and in the driver's seat. You know, very much always aligned. Ferrari is the only team that always seems to have this struggle.
Yes, I mean, we often hear on the team radios how the drivers are not happy with the calls being made by the team in terms of strategy, in terms of calling them into pit or not to pit. I mean, we've heard in the past Carlos Sainz saying stop inventing to the team more, because they do at times, they just create absolutely stupid strategic calls that should never be made, that could cost them a race win or cost them a podium. We need to see more consistency from them, more better strategic calls. I mean, they've got a Le Mans 24-hour win. That is so difficult to do and requires so much strategy. Surely you take what you've learned there and implement that into your Formula One team. I mean, yeah, I think we've given them excuses for way too long. It's time for them to really pick up their pieces and just get it right for once.
So that's Ferrari, of course. They just, as you say, they just need to get it right. They need to fix it up and just be better, essentially. Mercedes, now, they managed to get a podium in the last Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton getting ahead of Oscar Piastri there, who finished in fourth, unfortunately. Lewis Hamilton finished in third. George Russell, not particularly good, and he hasn't been particularly great for a couple of races now. So can Merck try and eye some podiums this weekend? Or are they looking good for that? Or could they just sort of simmer where they've been?
I mean, the interesting thing is that the A spec car, George Russell, seemed to outperform Lewis. Now with this new B spec, it's swapped. Lewis seems to be finding some good pace out there, while George is really struggling. I mean, George, I think, is maybe hoping they stayed with their A spec car because he felt a lot more competitive. But yeah, I don't know what's really gone on with him because he has shown that he is quite a competitive driver.
Yeah, and Aston Martin have fallen off. It's quite upsetting, and unfortunately, I just don't see them coming back into the fray. But a team that is pretty much taking their spot, though, McLaren. Now, they were fantastic in the last Grand Prix in Silverstone. Do we think that they'll do a similar thing now coming in Hungary? Because you said earlier, and you said, I think this track favors them. Now, do you think they can compete again? Does Lando Norris look at this and say, hey, you know who I'm competing with? It's not Charles Leclerc, it's not Carlos Sainz, it's Max Verstappen. And is that what Lando Norris is thinking in his head now?
Well, I think they'll have a bit of a fight on their hands. I don't necessarily know if they will be able to compete with the Red Bulls with their new upgrades this weekend. Of course, Red Bull haven't brought an upgrade for quite some time, and they are expected to bring some really big upgrades this weekend. We will, of course, let you know as soon as we do know what those upgrades are. But I mean, it's certainly hopeful for us Formula One fans that we have McLaren back in the fight at the front. I mean, we want to see them fighting for race wins. Hopefully, it is going to be the story for this race weekend. It would be very exciting if we do have them in contention for that race win.
Yeah. And do you have any other news for us for this podcast this week? Is there anything else you'd like to chat about as we start to wrap things up?
Well, we had Goodwood over the race weekend. Well, not race weekend, but this past weekend we had Goodwood Festival of Speed, which is a very prestigious event where a lot of auto manufacturers take their newest models of cars. I mean, we had Sebastian Vettel doing a show run in two of his old Formula One cars. He has one of Ayrton Senna's old cars, and he has also an old Williams car that he was running through that race weekend, running on sustainable fuels, which is great to see Sebastian Vettel back out on track in a car yet again. I certainly hope to see him on the Formula One grid very soon. We did see him last week, though, as well, at that Red Bull Pirelli test with Daniel Ricciardo. He was there doing some test laps as well with his cars.
Yeah, I mean, Vettel was seen racing around again over the weekend, as you said, and that was very, very fun to see. Do you think that he will ever come back to Formula One, or do you think he's permanently out?
He has apparently teased that he will be back on the grid very soon, whether that's in the
I'm sure that's
managerial position. I mean, I think he could certainly be brought into the sport as some sort of sustainability position. I don't know whether that would be to make sure that the sport is going in the right direction, or I don't know. It would be very interesting to see him back in the sport. I certainly hope that he finds his way back into the sport very soon.
Yeah. Now we've got 2 weekends until we've got that long break. So we've got 2 weekends for teams to sort things out before they've got a bit of time off before the latter half of the season. And going into these last 2 Grand Prix, I mean, who do you think is going to be our team to watch?
Well, certainly off the back of Silverstone, McLaren are really going to be the ones to watch, whether they can keep that upward growth going from Austria to Silverstone. Hopefully Hungary, they're going to be competitive yet again, and then onto that last race before the summer break, hopefully they will still be quite competitive. Maybe some of the other teams will also be wanting to make some developmental gains. We'll have to wait and see whether they'll be able to fast track some of those upgrades.
Indeed. And yeah, we're going to start wrapping things up here in the F1 podcast. Of course, we do this every Monday, so be sure to come and join us with it and come and have a conversation with us and ask us some questions. We do it live, of course, with me and Reese. And the show is proudly brought to you by Bitdefender currently. And you find it on the channel Forever Sports. So be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment after the video, of course, if you watch it in replay, as to your thoughts, ask us some questions, and yeah, go and tell your friends about us as well. Maybe we can get a good chat going coming into the future. Of course, we've got Hungary coming this weekend. We will be streaming all of it and coming with a preview on Thursday as well. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and check that out as well. Reese, thank you so much for joining us. From me and Reese, you have been watching Forever Motorsports, brought to you by Bitdefender. And we will see you again very soon for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Thank you so much, guys. Cheerio.